Hello and welcome to Cove Fort.
We are at historic Cove Fort, which is located just about halfway between Fillmore and Beaver, Utah, and it is built here specifically for that purpose. It was designed originally because people were traveling through the area and emigrating to the area were concerned about Native Americans and the American Indian wars that were going on and having attacks. But it's also, so it's a great stop for the stagecoaches that were coming through between the towns, the mail service that was running via Stagecoach and Pony Express, and the telegraph lines that were running through the area.
Cove Fort was built under the direction of the Latter-day Saints president, Brigham Young. And he instructed Ira Hinckley to move his family here and construct this fort and then live in it. And the reason for that was because as all of the immigrants were settling in the Utah area, there was a concern of attack from the Indians or just other, people that were already here in the area. Now, none of that ever actually happened because once Ira and his family got here, they decided it was just better to make friends with the Indians and the other people here. And so they never had to actually worry about any attacks because the Indians would come here and they would trade with the family that lived here, and the stagecoach would come and it would bring supplies, and guests would travel as they were coming through Utah. So in the end, what was supposed to be built as a defense ended up just being a place of hospitality.
And this would have been, I believe the fort was built in 1867. They said it took about 7 months to build the fort itself. It's made with volcanic rock and lime from the area here. Just an incredible thing to see that they built that. And it has been restored now. And while they don't have really the original furnishings and that kind of thing, they have time period sensitive pieces. So you can see what they would have had here, Ira Hinckley and his family and the travelers, including things like they even have it set up because they would have made their own batteries. And so they did that. And this was a relay station for the telegraph between Fillmore and Beaver because a telegraph message could travel on the wire about 30 to 40 miles. And this is about 30 to 40 miles from both Fillmore and Beaver. And so it's just interesting to think about the life they led here. And, the Hinkleys had a very large family. They had, 11 children who were all involved in doing chores and running this fort and welcoming the guests. And I thought it was really interesting to learn about the time period and to see it here at this fort.
Yeah, I can only imagine the people. They said the stagecoach came through twice a day, once headed north, once headed south, and it would bring the mail, but also the travelers along the way. And so there were extra places here that, the guests could stay. And when President, Young came and he brought his entourage, they had up to 70 people here that they were feeding at any one time. They had outbuildings, the barn behind us, the bunkhouses for the cowboys that helped take care of the cattle that were here. Plus they grew their own food in their garden, had the blacksmith shop on site. This was truly its own little community because there is a water source nearby, the creek, but it was not large enough to support a full community. So a town was never built at Cove Fort. It was always just the fort. And so they had to be self-sustaining. And that was all year round, including during Utah's harsh winters. And it's gorgeous. I mean, you look out here and you climb up onto the railing and the catwalk that was stood around the fort, and it's just a gorgeous setting out here. But when you think of the harsh environments that everybody lived through out here, it is quite impressive, all the things that they had to put up with on a daily basis.
You mentioned the water source. Cove Creek is not that far from here, but they said it's spring fed. And so by July, it was pretty much dried up and they didn't have that constant source of water. So you had to think about what they were dealing with when they had to live here. And to see the historic things they have here, like the weaving machines and the looms and the old washboards and the giant wood burning stove. An oven, which you were jealous of because you've cooked on one at LBJ State Park when we were there in Texas, and this was super impressive compared to that one.
Yeah, it was a big double oven with like a lot of burner stoves on top. But yeah, and you talk about like the creek drying up. They have an ice house here, and so during the winter they would go and they would from a local lake, they would cut ice chunks and ice blocks and store it in the ice house. And they said that would also last until about July. So I'm really not sure what they did for water, basically from like July to when it froze again. But that ice house helped keep their food cold, as well as in the ground, they had a root cellar. So they were able to store their vegetables and other products down in the ground so that it did keep them cold and preserve them for longer. Because yeah, they were out here all by themselves, and it was a good 6-hour wagon ride to get to Fillmore. And so you didn't do that trip very often.
No, and they even said, they talked about the kids doing the chores, and on Sundays when it was, going to the Sabbath to church, they'd get up at 4 a.m. to get their chores done, and then they'd get in the wagon, and it was 6 hours to go to church in Fillmore. So kids today have no idea what it would be like to do that. But it is still it is owned and operated by the Latter-day Saints, and it is free. It's really impressive. They share the story. There's about a 14-minute video you can watch when you first get here, which really kind of lays out the story of why this is here, and that was interesting. I think you should do that video before you go through the fort, and then you really get an appreciation for what you're walking through and what you're seeing.
Well, and they do have the elders and sisters are here working at the fort or volunteering their time. I'm not sure how that works exactly. But anyways, they are here and they are able to give guided tours. And so I encourage you can wander around on your own, but we went through with one of the guides, and I really appreciated that because they really know more of the history of the place, and not only from the history, but their religion as well, in terms of the significance of some of the components of the furniture and the Bibles and the books and everything that was here and why they had this place. So I really encourage you to stop and talk to one of them as well, because they're a wealth of information.
I thought the tour was a really good idea. At least start with that. And then every room, though, does have a sign with some information that you can kind of wander through and get pictures and video, or you can read the signs and learn more about it. So it's really, you could spend as little time here as much as you want. But I think most people say maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours would be about right.
Yeah, I would think so. They do have some picnic tables, so if you wanted to, depending on what time you were stopping by, you could, park in the parking lot and have a little picnic lunch and then wander around. What we ended up choosing to do was sort of taking that guided tour. We started with the video and then had Sister Jensen walk us around. And then we went back and did all the rooms again on our own so that we could take more time without everybody else on the tour to kind of really look at the different furniture and everything that was going on and read those signs. So again, take as much time as you want or as little. Bring your kids, because I think that, again, bacon doesn't come from HEB in the grocery store. You don't just walk into Walmart and get your groceries. They had to grow their own groceries and everything. And kids don't today, I feel, just don't necessarily, not that they don't appreciate it, but they just don't have that connection always. And so I think these types of places really hit home for everybody to understand, like, what life was like and, how they lived back in the, late 1800s.
Well, one of the things to put that in perspective was they have soap molds here, and some of the molds have ridges in them. And the idea was you would have a soap that would end up that you'd made yourself with lye, and it would have ridges that would then interlock with the ridges on your washing board. So yeah, nowadays when we throw our clothes in the washer and go do something else for an hour while it's washing itself, that's not how it was working back then. So if you get a chance, get to Cove Fort, learn about this time period, learn about the history and the people that were here, and the amazing hospitality that family put out for so many strangers from all kinds of backgrounds and nationalities and religions. And it was just very inspiring to see and hear that. Get here if you can. In the meantime,
keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there.